You guys ready?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Okay, wonderful. So we are live. Those of you who are tuning in on the Jazz Museum in Harlem live stream YouTube channel, spread the word. My name is Ryan Maloney. I work here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem in the programming department. Excited to have everybody here tonight. A little bit about the museum. We are here to preserve, promote, and present jazz, and we do that by presenting over 120 public programs a year. We have exhibit space here on 129th Street. We also serve over 200 school groups a year coming to the museum, experiencing live jazz, many times for the first time. So we do that every week. Yesterday we had a bunch of kindergartners in here, so having a good time, dancing, having fun. So those of you who made a donation, either on your way in or when you reserved your seat, we appreciate it. We do offer these programs free to the public, but donations go a long way, not only to helping us keep the lights on, but also to showing our funders, like the New York State Council of the Arts, Department of Cultural Affairs here in New York City, the Gilman Foundation, Louis Armstrong Educational Foundation, and many others. It shows that we have a community that believes in what we're doing. So thank you for those of you who made a donation. If you did not, we make it very easy at the front. You can, there's a cash box there. You can make a donation on your way out. Tonight, we are continuing our Jazz is Now Curatorial Fellowship program. It's in its third year. We invite, applications will be open fairly soon for 2025, so stay tuned for that. But this program allows 2 young artists every year the opportunity to not only come here and make use of the space for rehearsals, for kind of getting some of their projects together, but also presenting their own bands and also curating events here at the museum. It's kind of a slightly different skill set than just getting on the bandstand and playing. So through mentorship and support here at the museum, we provide 2 fellows the opportunity to spend a year curating events here at the museum. And that brings us to tonight, which is this is your 4th event or 5th?
This is
4th. You have 2 after this, yes. Luther S. Allison, pianist, band leader, drummer, and recently married. And we're excited to have him here as the 2024 Jazz is Now Curatorial Fellow, along with bassist Liani Mateo. So tonight, it's a panel discussion curated by Luther, and I will hand it over, and you can take it from here. So thank you so much for coming out, everybody.
Ryan Maloney, everybody. Give it up for him. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you. Thank all of you for coming as well. I appreciate you for taking time out of your Tuesday evening to join us here at the Jazz Museum of Harlem. So just a little bit of background information, and as Ryan mentioned a second ago, this is just a discussion, an open discussion, so you are all more than welcome to take the conversation in any way that your heart leads and desires. It's open. But to give everybody here a little bit of context for who you are all looking at, these are 3 very impactful musicians, people, artists, who I've seen from a distance and also have had the chance to work with some of them over the last few years. And just a little bit of backstory on each one of these people. I'll read a little bit of the bios. You always got to do this, get the formalities out the way. So first, immediately to my left is the wonderful Summer Camargo. Summer, you give it up for her. Summer is a native of Hollywood, Florida. She is, I'm going to move this a little bit closer. She is a Jerome Green Fellowship recipient at the Juilliard School, where she received her bachelor's and master's degrees. She's performed regularly in New York City venues such as Dizzy's, Birdland, Drum with the Mingus Big Band, and has also become the newest and the youngest member of the Saturday Night Live House Band in 2022. Give it up for that. Beautiful. She was awarded the Ella Fitzgerald Outstanding Soloist Award, the Dr. J. Douglas White Student Composition Contest, the International Trumpet Guild's Ryan Anthony Trumpet Memorial Competition, and Outstanding Trumpet Soloist Awards at Jazz at Lincoln Center's 2017, 18, and 19. She had 3 years locked down, folks. She said, you know, I'm coming back. Give me my 3. We call that a 3-peat in basketball. Anyways, I give a lot of basketball references. I'll try to pump the brakes on those throughout the rest of the night. Anyway, Summer has performed with Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, along with Jon Batiste, amongst many others, and is also a featured composer for the piece entitled Alalazu?
Alalazo.
Alalazo, got you, at the 2022 Jazz at Lincoln Center Gala. She's played in Broadway pits. She's done quite a few things. The list is endless. She actually just recently recorded and released her debut album, To Whom I'm Loved. Is that correct? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of Joey DeFrancesco's last recorded record dates.
Last one, yeah.
Exactly. Who is incredible late organist who we lost a couple of years ago, unfortunately. And she is also a proud Conselmer and Bach artist. So give it up for the one and only Summer Camargo.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll just give a brief background on the other two as well, and just giving this for some context, because as you can see, we have different generations that are being represented here, and that's kind of the core of this conversation. Next, at the far end, we have Jason Marshall, who is based here in New York City from D.C., is that right?
It is right.
Yes, indeed. Been here since 2003. He's made a name for himself as a premier baritone saxophonist of the bebop tradition. That's not stopped him from using his musicality and curiosity to perform a multitude of styles of music on multiple reed instruments. His composing, arranging, and playing encompasses the joy and depth of Black American music. Since the early 2000s, Jason has performed with his own ensemble, the Roy Hargrove Big Band, RH Factor, Aretha Franklin, The Temptations, come on somebody, Shaka Khan, and a multitude of other internationally known musicians, as well as the Masters of New York City. Marshall has released multiple records and projects as a leader, including the 2020's Joy Unspeakable. New Beginnings is his first release on the label Cellar Live. Give it up for the one and only, the incomparable Jason Marshall. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the queen, the one and only, jazz and blues vocalist Catherine Russell is a native New Yorker. Born into a musical family, her father, Louis Russell, was a legendary pianist, composer, and band leader, and Louis Armstrong's longtime musical director. Her mother, Carlene Ray, was a pioneering multi-instrumentalist and vocalist who performed with an all-female swing orchestra, the International Sweethearts of Rhythm, in the late 1940s. Pianist Mary Lou Williams and arranger orchestra leader Cy Oliver. After graduating from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1980, Catherine began recording and touring as a backup singer with, here comes some more names at you, David Bowie, Cyndi Lauper, Jackson Browne, Paul Simon, Roseanne Cash, Michael Feinstein, and Steely Dan, whom I'm a big fan of as well, to whom she still works. Her solo career started in 2005, and she's released 9 solo albums since 2006. 2 of her albums, Harlem on My Mind and Alone Together, earned Grammy nominations for Best Jazz Vocal Album, and I believe you have another project that's up for Grammy consideration. Is that the Duo project?
Yes, we just entered it.
Yes.
Not yet.
Right, so we'll see. So put your
We'll
votes
see.
in. Put your votes in. Where did I leave off? Let's see. As a solo artist, she has performed at major festivals and venues in the U.S., Europe, and South America. She's performed with Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis, the Philly Pops, the Pasadena Pops, and Michael Feinstein, the Houston Symphony, and the New World Symphony. Catherine has taught at Berklee College of Music, the New School, Michael Feinstein Songbook Academy, and Young Arts, as well as teaching master classes and private students. So give it up for the one and only Catherine Russell. So as you can see, we have 3 powerful people to my left. And over the next, what time is it? Got to check the time because I can talk. But I'm going to pass this over to you all. And I'm going to end my soliloquy here. But over the next 40 minutes, I'd love to just get all of your insight on a few questions that I have prepared. The first question I'd like to ask, of course, as I mentioned, we have representation from each generation. And just to kind of lead, I feel like especially this year, we've seen a lot of tension kind of between mentors and mentees. This can be at an academic level, at a street level, in many different places in the idiom of music, and of jazz in particular. So we'll kind of touch on some more things academically later, because that's another thing I'd love to discuss with everybody is how academia and music, specifically jazz music within the classroom, whether it's conservatories, universities, middle school programs outside of a school, but just a part of an institution like Jazz at Lincoln Center has a lot of educational programs outside of school. So we'll touch on that later. But anyways, the first question I would love to ask, and feel free to take your time with this, is what do you believe for each of you is your role right now in the scene today? And what is your capacity also as a mentor or even a mentee within the music? So whoever wants to take it, you got it.
That's a loaded question.
Looks like it's all you, Summer.
Well, it's interesting because I just graduated school. I was just actually talking about this with Catherine backstage. I remember being in high school and, yeah, seeing a figure like Wynton Marsalis was amazing. He was one of my idols in high school, middle school, definitely. But seeing someone like Anthony Hervey, who went to my high school and was going to Juilliard and playing with Wynton Marsalis, and now he's playing with Michael Bublé and all these amazing people. He's just 5 years older than me. It's like, wow, like that all of this seems very attainable now, because we're in the same generation, we play the same instrument. And so I think what I've been doing a lot and just sort of just taking advantage of how young I am, just going out to schools and going to middle schools and high schools and just trying to inspire kids that way. Like, hey, like I'm a young person, I was able to do this, I think you can too. And I think it's also helpful as a female to see like other female role models as well. So that's sort of my mindset right now, just like leaving school and trying to inspire the next generation. Also using social media as to use it for good, because there's a lot of negativity on there, but I think if you promote jazz in the right way, it can be used for very, very good things. So those are my thoughts.
Beautiful, excellent. Did anybody else want to speak on that? Please.
Well, it took a while for me to start collaborating with younger musicians, which is what I wanted to do. It took a long time just to establish myself, and record enough where people know me, more so nowadays. And so the great news is that I am collaborating a lot more with younger musicians, which has been really fun, man. And Summer is one of those individuals. I mean, I had a gig at Birdland, and my trumpet player was on a movie set, and he said, "Well, I can't." He was on like a Scorsese, movie set. "I can't now. We're shooting this week, and we need a sub." And so Jon recommended Summer, and Summer came in the night she was coming back to New York the night before the gig. Totally nailed the gig. I sent you the charts. I don't know how we did this, but you came in nailing it. And I said, "This is great. A young person, a female." And I had met Summer when you were in high school. I'd met you, at Jazz Lincoln Center at one of the galas. And so this is the kind of thing that's exciting for me. Besides teaching, and we did a little master class the other day for middle schoolers, and they were so excited about learning. And I have had people in their 20s in my band now for maybe 4 or 5 years, which is fantastic, and I just recorded with an album with Sean Mason, who I think now is 26. And so it keeps my energy up, and it keeps us bridging what we feel like jazz is, so that we can learn from each other and find new ways of expressing ourselves through jazz. So that's kind of, hopefully that's part of my role now, is really bridging the generations and working with a lot of different people of all ages, which is fantastic.
My role is one of, I found having to repair a lot of the generational sort of pathways, because I'm 41, and so we were the last generation to learn music without social media. No one had phones, and I'm saying phones, smartphones, right? Like when I moved to New York, we still had house phones. And I was a student at the new school when I moved here. And it was the end of, how people say I caught the tail end of a lot of stuff. And I caught the tail end of, learning music by just being voracious in your quest for learning. And so because we being my generation, a lot of us sort of got, I won't say forgotten about, but without becoming famous, we just sort of slotted in where we could fit in and, started making gigs. And our attrition rate got really high because that's also when, in the early 2000s, is when music school got really expensive. And I remember at the time, 2003, 4, 5, music school would cost $5,000 more every semester. And so you would just see dozens and dozens of your classmates just not show up again, and that was it. So now, having been what I would call a blue-collar musician since the day I got to New York, I've served as a representative that there is another way other than becoming famous the day you start playing music. And, students now ask me, well, like, I didn't get into Juilliard. Can I still play? Of course. I tell them when I came to New York, Juilliard didn't have a jazz program. And my one and only attempt at going to Juilliard, when they did have a jazz program, I called the director and asked him plainly. I said, "Hey, I want to do a master's degree at the Juilliard school." He laughed and he hung up the phone. I said, "All right, cool." But again, there was no one who could really stop me in what I was going to do. I just had to figure out the path of, sort of, I won't even say least resistance because there's never not been a lot of resistance, but that's the nature of this journey, right? And so often I find myself in a role where I'm talking to students, encouraging them to continue when the one way they think it's going to work doesn't work. And, there's things have become so artificial in how things actually work that often, as an educator, I'm faced with having to get students square again in terms of their perception of reality, because they'll say, "Well, so and so on social media." I say, "Well, that's not real." I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying, when we were kids, we used to get a videotape in the mailbox that said highlight reels on it from Sports Illustrated, and we knew that wasn't the whole game. And now social media is highlight reels, but there's no disclaimer to say this is the highlights. So, I've been just a working musician this whole time, but I'm also a representative of reality before that. So particularly as an educator, that's a lot of the work I do.
That's beautifully said, beautiful. And this isn't my second question, but that brings something up. You touched on this a little bit as well, Summer. I'd love to hear what everybody has to say about this. One of my personal beliefs is that right now, the hunger for popularity is outweighing the hunger for legitimacy.
Sure.
So I feel like now we see a lot of people who, I know the formula to become popular on TikTok.
Sure.
I know the formula to do this, but people aren't putting as much emphasis on, am I legit at what I do, though?
Sure.
Can I do what I do, right? So
Right.
how do you think that may have changed over time, where maybe when that wasn't the case back in the day, where it was just a matter of legitimacy is what's going to get you the gig. Legitimacy is what's going to get you your platform.
Sure.
Whereas I feel now, and Summer, I feel like you're somebody who's done an excellent job of, you're legit. Like, you do what you do at a high level. And at the same time, that has been something that has kind of flourished through other platforms, such as social media and other things. And it's, there's some people where you only see them online and you never see them on the bandstand. It's like, man, I see you on every Instagram thing, but I never see you on one gig.
Correct.
Not
so one.
Being somebody who is been able to do that successfully on both sides, but also being more of a blue collar, I'd love to hear from everybody of what are some of your thoughts on just kind of social media and the progression of it over time, legitimacy versus popularity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking about that a lot. There's just like so many different ways you can go about it. Like you were saying, just going in like a more popular direction. Like, what is the trend, the highest trend that's on TikTok, and like how can I add this to my videos? But I'm also thinking about it in both ways. Like, first I'm thinking about like, okay, who am I as an artist? How am I representing myself on social media? And how is this, showcasing my playing and being legit? And then what are like, just thinking about like, okay, maybe hashtags or like, are the captions or like responding to people's comments, or the time of day actually is a really important aspect too, or what times. Like those don't necessarily affect the video. But then there's some trends where it's like the editing is like way too out of hand and they're just focused on very like little things where it seems almost like a meme almost. And so I think that really takes away from the music and can come off as like really cheesy. And so just really just focusing on like who am I and how can, and if there is a trend that works with what I'm doing, then great, awesome. But I'm not gonna bend who I am to make it work with the trend, you know, which I feel like some people are doing nowadays online. So, but there's a way to do it.
Oh, beautiful.
And there are a lot of amazing people that are doing it as well. And so just finding those role models and seeing what they're doing and implementing those things to what you're doing is the key, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wow. I'm 68, so this is kind of another language to me. And so what I've done is hired people to help me because I don't know anything about trends or, you know, I don't do videos for social media or anything like that. I mean, I'll do them to promote a gig, but I am very blue collar. I was raised by very blue collar parents, so they just kind of got out there and played and did a lot of gigs, you know. And so that's when I discovered, oh, that's what it is. You know, it's not about fame. It's about just working, you know. And so I have a student who now I'm working along with her to promote herself because she's in her 20s, but she's not very active. So she's getting more active on social media. But when I have given her, here, call this person and get hired, go and meet them, go down there, that's been a little slower for her. So she's not as confident about just going out, you know. And so that I think is really important to, you know, encourage our students to just get out there and play, you know, which summer you're doing all of it, as Luther said, which is incredible. So you're a great role model for how to work and also promote yourself and understand the social media space and all of that. So I don't know that I'm learning any more personally about promoting myself on social media, but I have a lot of help.
Yeah.
So I have a good team.
And I'll say one quick thing, and I'll pass it back off to you, Jason, is to that point as well, I think one thing of this age of information or connectivity or whatever you want to call this time, one of my personal beliefs is that it can make it very difficult for people of our generation, you know, we're close to the same age, to put ourselves out there, you know. So it kind of seems like it's been a space for people to, as you mentioned, to put themselves out there, and hopefully that could lead to some work. So, but anyways, Jason, yeah, what were you saying?
I find that social media makes promotion the only skill set. And I know that I didn't come to New York to do promotion. Not that it's a bad thing. That's just not the skill set I studied to have. Neither did I come to New York to make videos because that's its own skill set. Social media as a platform didn't exist. And if, you know, for me, when I got to New York, if it didn't involve a saxophone, I had no interest in it. So when it came out, like I remember seeing the first smartphone. I remember I was in JFK Airport, was on tour with Roy Hargrove, and we crossed the Mingus Big Band at JFK, and Jeremy Pelton had a Palm Pilot Trio. And it was the coolest thing, man. He had an antenna and a little stylus pen, and he was writing on it. He got his sunglasses on. He's like, yeah, y'all know, man. And I'm like, yo, what is that? You know, he's writing. I'm like, man, I never seen anybody write on the telephone, you know. And it was another few years before any of us got anything else like that. He was an early adopter, you know. And then because we had Blackberries and, you know, like I actually missed the Blackberries because it made us feel more business oriented.
Yeah.
But as soon as social media became where people engage, you very quickly noticed people have the social skills, analog social skills were declining. And so now people are afraid to go where other people are because you can't stage that. And I find that almost without exception, the larger the following, the weirder they are in person. Now, I don't engage so much where I have like a lot of followers or nothing, but when I got to New York, you needed to start a religion to have a follower, right? And now that's the paradigm. So I find that, social media as a tool can be useful, but not at the cost of social skills. Also, I find the social component of music can get lost in, because people engage less person to person. And if we're not bringing, everyone can do music for their own reasons, but I'm not interested in music that doesn't bring people together. But I have seen folks that prefer the reality that has been created via social media over what I'm calling analog reality.
Beautiful answer. Beautiful answers from everybody. And that kind of brings me to the next point, because I feel like that touches on something that can be used well, but is also potentially an issue within people in our generation. But the next question is, what are some issues that everybody has noticed within each of our respective generations? I think it's so easy for, we always have this old trope of, oh, the young cats don't do this, and they don't something, this, that, and the third. So now let's look in the mirror, and I'd love to just hear from everybody. What are some things that each of us have felt are some issues we've experienced within our own communities and generations?
You mind if I answer that first?
Yeah.
I find that there's just a real breakdown in intergenerational transmission. And the thing you learn about as a parent, it's never the kid's fault. They didn't decide that. Like the generation you created didn't decide the terms. They're just reflecting what you showed them, if you showed them anything. And so for my generation, there's a lot of frustration because it feels often as if we just fell off trees. Like no one helped us. We're just out here. Yeah. And so those of us who have found a way often look disconnected because they didn't have the guidance to develop in a way that looks intentional. It's very kind of thrown together. I'm fortunate just because I was so hard-headed, I didn't know better than to go ask my elders, like, how do I do this? And some of them were like, I'm not showing you anything. I say, okay, well, you're going to have to move me. And they're like, well, I can't move you, so I got to show you something, so you'll leave. But often it came down to that, And I've been in situations where I'm like, I don't take kindly to undue negativity. So if we got to go outside and speak English about this, that's an option. That's not the way this generation works anymore. But I remember being in those situations, but it took that kind of persistence to get any kind of information. So now I think the problem is that we have to act quickly because the generation that should have brought us up is now starting to go. So we have to, kind of be about the work of preparing what's left.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well, singers, I learned everything on the bandstand, basically. Just people talking to me or not talking to me. As you know, I remember a gig. It was a Frankie Manning, one of his dance things when he was still alive at the Roseland Ballroom, and I was working with bassist Earl May, who invited me to to jump up and sing a tune with the band, you know. And you could have hung meat. It was so cold. The vibes were just horrible. I stepped up on that. Hi, everybody. And they were like, and then I sang, and, you know, it chilled out a little bit. But, you know, we learned the hard way, you know. And, but sometimes elders are very helpful. So I will say, you know, some of my elders, you know, the people in their 80s now, have been really warm and helpful, and not stiff and just, you know, rigid about everything if you ask them something. You know what I mean? So, but most of the time, that rigidity, I definitely experienced that. So I also said, well, I'm going to be bullheaded. What else am I going to do?
Exactly.
I got to just keep trying to do this.
Absolutely.
You know? So I do find that, and this is why I have really been grateful to work with younger people, you know. But as I say, some of my elders, you know, have been very helpful to me, very giving, you know, like Houston Person, you know, these type of people. Houston is just the warmest and greatest, and, you know, he'll just encourage you, you know. So it's a mix, but mostly, but I've encountered a lot of what Jason was saying.
My generation's a little different. We have some different problems. I think because of everything being, you can just access everything on your phone, there's sort of this mindset of like, oh, it's going to be given to me. Oh, I don't have to do anything. It's just going to come right over to me. And we've had some discussions. When I was at Juilliard, we had some discussions at school, and students are like, why aren't you giving us the schedules of this and this band and this band? And it's like, well, why don't you go and try to find it yourself? And I remember Winton was saying, like, I literally followed the Jazz Messengers on tour and was just following them and just like wouldn't stop listening to them and talking with everyone. And then eventually he got a gig there, playing with them. And so I think there's also this like sense of like over sensitivity. And it's almost like, oh, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to. I'll send them one text message. I'll send them one email, and it's like, okay, after that, I feel like I'm just bothering them, and it's like, and then when I talk to the older generation, they're like, no, like bother us, like we're busy, but we want you to be just consistent and persistent with getting with what you need, and so I think that's also another problem. There was one more thing I was going to talk about. Maybe it'll come another time. But yeah, I think that those are some things with my generation. I think, yeah, because of maybe social media and just having access to everything just in your hands, you know, with cell phones. That same mindset can be implemented to your jazz career, in which it doesn't work like that. You got to go out and do things. Oh, I remember what I was going to talk about. I also feel like at jam sessions and like gigs, I feel like what I see is mostly just young people are out there. I don't see a whole lot of the older generation musicians coming out and really trying to just create a beautiful vibe with the jam sessions. Like, we'll talk about someone like Roy Hargrove, who really started a beautiful small scene. Now when I go to smalls, it's mostly run by young people, and it's kind of chaotic and not, I actually don't really like going there, because it's just like, I just think the younger generation doesn't necessarily, they don't have the role models to know what it's like to run a great jam session, or even just sticking around and talking to us like after gigs. Like, I find that a lot of the old people, which is understandable, like, you know, if you got to go home, then that's cool. But I find that it's pretty consistent. Like, after each gig, it's only the young people that are sticking around and hanging out. So I'd love to see more of the older generation musicians doing that.
Excellent points. And even to that, not only does it happen on the back end, but it also happens on the front end. They stick around, but they don't even come for the gig. Cats just pull up for the session. It's like, well, maybe we can have the decency to watch the gig before I sit in on the session, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're all true things. that actually segues perfectly into the next point. And a little bit of what everybody else was mentioning, I think there's this difficulty that we experience where I would imagine maybe it was a little bit easier to do what Wynton Marsalis did back in the day, to follow some of these bands on the road. I'm sure there was definitely difficulty to it. It wasn't easy just to, I'm out of here, I'm going to just follow them. But at the same time, flights now are $400. If I want to go see, my wife and I were long distance for 5 years, if I wanted to see her, unless I got it extremely far in advance, it was at least $200. Tuition when I was in college, out of state, was minimum $40,000. It's continuing to go up. Some institutions into the $60,000 and $70,000. Inflation is real. Rent isn't $60 like it used to be years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Decades ago.
Decades.
$60?
Bruh. You know?
That was before color TV.
Yeah.
$60.
$60. But even, you know, now rent is, if you want to live fairly well, around at least $1,000.
No.
At least.
No. Rent. The average rent in New York is $4,200 a month.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. So to that point,
Yeah.
it's just not the same. And also the other side of it, where we see a lot of the elders in the music, where now it's, well, to keep up with this, now I need to get some sort of university job that has benefits.
Of course, yeah.
I can't be running around Smalls, Mesro, Dizzy's, and if I break my ankle, now I have what's happening now? What's the deal?
Sure.
So I need benefits, I need consistency. Well, now I have a family, I need a home. So I think there's this difficulty of, you know, even as Summer mentioned, man, we don't have this mentorship, but also just the entire culture of the music has changed. You know, it's changed so drastically to where now it's, well, maybe they feel, well, I can't do that because I have to keep the roof over my children's head and supply. And we're like, well, the things y'all are complaining about for us, we can't get that because we don't get you. You know what I'm saying? How am I supposed to follow you around if the first flight is $300? You know what I'm saying? It's impossible. The Amtrak ticket that week is $120. You know, to get. If you live in Jersey to come here one way, it's like at least $10.
Yeah.
Metro North at a certain time of day, peak hours, is $15, $16. So anyways, with all of these things in mind, how have these relationships changed over time? Now, this is kind of getting more into jazz education. Now that you see more of this music in the school, most of our contact points with our elders is going to be in some sort of a classroom or institution, right? So how is it that we can mend some of these relationships, or even how did I write this? What I wrote is, how do we think that modern jazz education has changed the dynamic of these mentor and mentee relationships in our field? And how has this changed how we learn or practice the music? And even wider, to broaden that, as we were mentioning before, of just these contact points. You know, the contact points within the clubs, contact points at the venues. What are some of your thoughts on these things?
So I saw that change. And it was while I was in school, because in about 2010, 11, music school crossed the barrier into, it became a luxury item. And so because that happened, right, and that's not the fault of any individual, right, the cost of things just got high enough where only people who didn't exchange their time for money could attend. Right, because you talk about $60,000 and $70,000, the music schools now are at or around $100,000. Yeah, and many of those students pay for the 4 years in one check. You know, and you know, you throw in an apartment and, you know, monthly expenses and whatever, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars to effectively babysit folks until they are, you know, age into what they're going to inherit anyway, right? And that's not those individuals' fault, right? It's not the student's fault that that's what it is, but that's what it is. So because things cost so much that it attracts people that don't work for a living, the thing that they do doesn't have to work because they don't work for a living. And it's not their fault, it's what it is. Now, in terms of the generation, like, I have some objections to putting paywalls on culture, because one of the other things that does, in addition to just restricting access, is that it inclines people towards revisionist history. You only know the version that you can pay to learn, whether or not that actually would happen. And so often we find that, particularly in the Black American experience, you can't know your own history if you can't afford to learn it.
Yeah.
And then should you gain any small degree of access, you get crumbs. You get, bits and pieces, and, I heard so-and-so say such and such, and, in passing this thing happened or whatever. And it's different now because as a vocational practitioner, I was able to just show up and make the gigs. And I said, hey, I play baritone, I play other saxophones, I play whatever, but hire me and I'll show up and do a good job, I promise. And it worked out. Now that most of it is done in schools, it's a paywall. It's a paywall around learning the vocation of it, the craft, the culture, the history. It's a paywall around all of it. Black Americans have never attended college in a majority, ever, even with the advent of HBCUs. Most of the people who go to HBCUs are first gens and immigrants. And that's not a good or a bad thing. That's just an observation of the enrollment, right? Because it costs money. And so you need money to go, right? Also, HBCUs have never done, in any large majority, a great job teaching Black art and culture, right? Like you might have a marching band here, a gospel choir here, isolated, but by and large, that's not what HBCUs do. Again, that's just an observation, okay? So as the economics just creates paywalls, it necessarily only includes people that can afford to get over those paywalls. And so what's there is only to do with people who can afford to get beyond the paywall.
Yeah, precisely. Anybody else want to hop in there?
Wow. Yes, and I guess it's the same kind of a thing with being really determined in finding a way to
Absolutely, yeah.
to get out and hear people if they have a reduced ticket for something, and it's $10. I don't know where you're going to find $10, but you find it, and you go to that gig. Go to that person, get the student rate, and just get out somehow.
Yeah,
and do it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know how else we do it in New York City.
Well,
So,
now, I mean, we used to listen to who was playing at the Blue Note from the sidewalk.
Yeah, well, yeah. And they had the late, when
the
I was
jam session.
first
Yeah,
started
yeah.
going out, it was $5.
Yeah,
When I heard
Sure.
Filoni, I heard Rossan Roland Kirk for
Wow.
$10 or
Yeah,
something.
sure.
$5.
Yeah, right.
And then they said, oh, you can stay for the second set
yeah.
for
right,
free,
Right,
Right.
right.
So now,
They don't do that anymore.
no, so now, you're on your own, really, unfortunately.
sure.
But then you would need to you got to be so much more determined, don't you? To talk about that. You have to be so much more determined, like as you are, Summer. In finding a way, because you are everywhere. I saw you every place. And I saw you at the gala first, and then the next time I saw you, you were subbing for Winton in a rehearsal or something. Like you were up in the rehearsal, and it wasn't that much. It wasn't that much time had passed. So I wonder about Black folks. Are we doing that? Are we doing everything we can do now?
We generally are. Again, it's a very high
tough.
paywall.
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of it is just relationships that many of us cannot afford to make. You just you got to get to New York.
Yeah.
From wherever you've come from, right? I was fortunate I could take the Chinatown bus to New York. Most of us can't do that, right? You got to be able to afford to go to the places. You got to look away for some of the places. You got to know the people. All that stuff costs money now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's just what it is, frankly. You know, I mean, and often in a lot of the schools, the school districts are underfunded. So a lot of the resources that were sort of incidental with band and choir and stuff,
Yeah,
it's just not
you don't
there
have that
anymore.
Those things are getting budget for those things are getting cut
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
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 And one of the sad things is it seems like the culture in which this music was conceived, if you look at that today, the people of those same communities can't even afford to do
That's
that.
what I'm saying. Yep.
It's like now to get access to that,
Yeah.
something that was once, it was mainstream then.
Yeah.
But now to get something that's more niche,
Right.
I can't even afford to do this. I can't even afford to buy an instrument.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, and even just the culture surrounding all of these things too. I think you have the culture of the music. Now I know I'm the moderator. I'm just hopping real quick and I'm gonna hop back out.
Come on.
But I think there's a culture that's surrounding it. I think the culture itself of the music is, with that being the nucleus. But if you look at the membrane, hopefully my science is right. But if you look at the membrane of it, that's the people who are letting you into the clubs. That's the, oh yeah, come on, I got you.
Right.
I see us as a young cat.
Right.
If you look at, you know, you hear stories of people, I saw this young brother, I gave him a trumpet.
Yeah.
Today,
Yeah.
my parents bought $4,000 for my first saxophone.
See?
My dad said, you better take care of this instrument, son.
Yeah.
And the way he gazed at me, I knew, okay, if I mess up,
Sure.
if I mess something up with this, he's
That's it.
messing me up.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
Right,
I need
right.
to take care of this.
Right.
But even just how casual that was surrounding the music of here, I feel like there was so much more of this, where now that's why I'm gonna need something in return, you know? Money. I'm gonna need something green.
Right. But that's the economics have caused that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, listen, to your point, when I first got to New York, I just decided I was going to go out every night, right? Whether I had money or not. Like, if I got enough to get on the subway, hopefully that'll be enough. I went up to Smoke, and I was staying at the dorm in Brooklyn Heights. And I got there, and Tommy Maxwell, you know, he's still at Smoke. He opens the door. All right, $20 cover. And I said, well, I don't have any money. And I start to walk back to the train. He goes, man, who are you? I said, I'm Jason Marshall. He goes, where you came from? I said, Brooklyn. He goes, man, come on, man. Just sit over there. Right? That doesn't happen anymore. I'm not saying nothing against Tommy. I'm just saying, generally speaking, that doesn't happen anymore. Also because now the students say, hey, here's for a whole table and food for both sets. And $300 later, I'll see you tomorrow. The set was great. All power to them. But that's what it is now. So, again, the economics have dictated who's here.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I have another question, but did you want to touch on that at all, or?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a different perspective because I just came out of the education system. Because I was talking about it with someone the other day, like, should I go to school for jazz? And people were saying no, maybe yes. I think when you do get to school and you do get to study jazz, you do get that intergenerational connection, which sometimes, like we were saying, we don't always get when we do go out and we do those jam sessions or the gigs. And I think there's this community that's built in. So when I did move to New York, it was so much easier for me to make that transition to become a professional musician because I made all those connections at Juilliard, and through Juilliard, like Jazz Lincoln Center and other clubs. Also, I think you were saying what you were saying, Catherine, was spot on with like being determined. It's like, okay, like going out to Smoke, like a place like that. It's like, okay, I've maybe seen a show at Smoke like a couple times because I know it's really expensive, and so just thinking about like, okay, like the student tickets. Looking for all the options, like, okay, do I know this person? Can I get on the guest list? Okay, Dizzy's. Oh, there's the late night session. Okay, the student tickets. Okay, and then as a woman, like, you know, you don't want to be out on the subway super late, so it's like, okay, budgeting Ubers and all of that. So it can be really difficult, but I think as long as you're super determined, I think you can find a way to make that happen. Even if it's through like something like social media, which is free and people have access to that. Or just, hey, a friend of a friend, like, hey, do you know so-and-so's contact info? Do you know so-and-so's this? Hey, what's the rehearsal like for the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra? I know that's free. Like people can just come and show up to that. So just finding all of the resources that you can, I think, can be really advantageous. And instead of just being like, oh well, that's gonna be $100. I guess I can't go. It's like, no, like what's the way around that? Like, can I like, I don't know, maybe split the bill with someone, like so something, like trying to just make it work. Hey, can you ride back with me on the subway so I don't have to take an Uber back home? Things like that. Just being smart about it. But I also understand your point, Jason.
What year did you start going to Juilliard?
I started in 2019.
Cool. Yeah.
So pretty recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And that actually answered the next question I had a little bit, what everybody said. Everybody kind of hinted at it. The following question I had was, how is everyone here? And everybody was sprinkled throughout everyone's answers throughout the last roughly 50 minutes we've been doing this. I mean, we'll have to wrap up pretty soon. I have a couple more questions I'd love to ask everybody. And I'd love to just make this comment because I feel like everybody, through the last question and others, mentioned how each person is specifically pursuing people of other generations. Like, I feel like you kind of just answered it in your last question for people of our generation in our 20s. And I think even towards the beginning and even just seeing you hiring Damo, doing the recording with Sean, and actively pursuing younger musicians. And I've just heard on the streets, just people I know, Marcus Howell, Kelvin Walters, people who have just told me, oh yeah, I'm just getting up with Jason. He's gonna show me this. I feel like every time I hear your name brought up, it's, oh yeah, I hit him up. He's gonna help me with some of this, with some ligatures, with some reeds or the horn, get my sound. So I feel like with everybody here, that's another reason I wanted to bring all three of you together, is because I feel like it's very apparent from the other side, seeing from a distance of how each one of you are pursuing people of every other generation.
Sure.
So thank you all for doing that.
Yeah.
Another question I'd love to ask is, let's see, where I'm going to go. Ask that one. Two more things. Yeah. So I'll ask this question. We can go pretty short for this, and then the last one will open up a little bit. It's one thing to make a bit of a splash on the scene, and it's another thing to maintain a career, right? An extensive career. I'd love to hear from everybody. How is it that you've each gone about that, with everybody being in a different stage of your career? Also kind of in different scenes a little bit. There's still some crossover, but everyone's fairly like kind of in their own world to a degree, you know? I know you're early on, but it seems like the way you've set things up is in a way where you can tell, okay, this is somebody who's here for the long haul, you know? And the two of you have been in this for some time as well. So just, I'd love to hear from each perspective. How is it that you have considered, or intentionally or maybe unintentionally, work towards developing a solid and consistent career?
Yeah, I guess I can answer first. I think being, well, now in being in 2024, you know, you're sort of expected to do everything yourself. Like, okay, you can't hire a copyist anymore. You can't hire, you have to have, you know, certain, like, very consistent work in order to have, like, a manager, booking agent. Like, all these things, you're just sort of expected to do it on your own, especially at the beginning. So I think being super versatile is a very key thing. So something that I was working on in high school was I did a lot of composing. So I entered different competitions. In high school, I found out about different honor bands. So it's like, oh my gosh, I want to do a band like NYO Jazz through Carnegie Hall, because then I get to work with Sean Jones and I get to work with Diane Reeves and Kurt Elling and all these amazing people. So I applied to a lot of different honor bands, and that actually was amazing because I, first of all, learned the repertoire that I needed to enter those things. But you learn a lot of skills, like being able to record yourself, talk to a camera, write different essays. So I think the process of applying to those things is super beneficial. But then once you actually get to those honor band settings, and it's amazing. meet a lot of amazing people. And actually, most of the people on my first album I met through high school honor bands. So you really keep those relationships. Those relationships just last. And so I applied to as many as I could in high school. And so by the time I got to New York, I already sort of had a little bit of a community built in because I had already met all those people in high school. Also tried to apply with different composition things, and you mentioned the student writing contest in high school. And so thinking about that now, how can I find more ways to meet more people? And so having that mindset, also just as a trumpet player, I play lead, I solo, which I think can be hard to find sometimes, people who are able to do both. So I really try to keep both of those things up because then I get called to do more things. Hey, can you do lead in this big band? Oh, you can't, actually we can't have you in the lead chair, but you can solo on this. And I think also just trying to be in different scenes. So there's some gigs that I get called where it's more of like a swing band. And then I also play with the Mingus Big Band. Then also some more small group stuff or some more commercial stuff. Like SNL is very like funk, 70s vibe, rock. And with SNL, I have to be able to do both lead and soloing. And then I also bring in some composition stuff as well. So I think just overall being very versatile, putting yourself out there, those are two things that I've really tried to do in my career, and it's definitely has helped a lot.
Very nice. Very nice.
I had to kind of find a way that was off what was the beaten path when I landed in New York. Because when I got to New York, the SNL chair had just opened up. I actually spoke to Lou Delgado before he left New York. But when I got to New York, they said, okay, you got to get a gig on Broadway, you got to work with SNL, you got to work with Wynton Marsalis. And I got here August of 2003, yeah. By December of 2003, it was made clear Jason Marsh, you're not going to do any of those things. So you can either decide that that's it, or you can stick around and see what's here. And it turns out there's, outside of those three, quite fortunate circumstances, there's the rest of the world, right? So I said, I wasn't going to leave, and so I said, okay, I'm going to just go out every night. If I'm going to play on the subway platform or in the park till I got enough money to eat, till I got enough money, pay rent somewhere. And turns out there's all this other music to play. So I just, stayed kind of blue collar this whole time. And, through just going out every night, going to jam sessions, that's how I met Roy Hargrove. That's how I met, most of the folks that I still work with now. Without ever really making a splash. The splash thing for me is where folks get it wrong because, yeah, some folks are going to make a splash, and some folks just get in the water and start swimming. Mm-hmm. And, the splash thing is volatile, right? Like, because then you got to make another splash. And then, eventually you just can't keep that up, and that's why people start struggling with what they call relevance. But to me, once you're worried about being relevant, it means you've been going about it the wrong way. Because music is its own excuse for being. Like, you don't have to justify your existence as a musician, but you do have to kind of re-up on that, making a splash. You do have to make a splash if folks only call you to make a splash. So for me, it's always been about developing, just quietly developing, doing what I had to do. I've never been so famous I couldn't go back home and just work out some stuff. So I just the environment that I always put myself in was always competitive. Always competitive. So I just wanted to be better than whoever I was around. And in a lot of ways, I'm still like that. I'm just trying to be the best thing that there is to be in terms of the vocation of music. And that always kind of left me around people who were testing me. And so at, 21 years in, there's a certain piece about the existence now because if I never make a splash, I walk around with the skills to stick around. If I never engage on social media again, I can always show up and make a gig. So in a way, I feel to a degree insulated from how things change at this point, because music is always going to have to be made by somebody. And as a vocational practitioner, I can kind of just sit on the side and be like, okay, they doing it like this now. That's cool. That'll run its course, and then we'll be back to making music. Yeah. So.
Amen to that.
And yes, to both of you. I just wanted to do as many things as I could do, learn the skill of singing in as many situations as I could be in. So a lot of recording sessions, different shows, and I knew how I was doing by the other people that were at the recording session. So if I was in a recording session with people that sang with Luther Vandross, I said, okay, that's good. I'm in the, good.
Yeah.
And then I learned from them how to record, you know, and then I did a lot of, demos, songwriters demos that paid my bills, and, clubs, where I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to hang out in this booze establishment for 6 hours, but I did that. Sang at Catch Your Rising Star Comedy Club in between a lot of comedians that you would recognize their names now, and just needed to make a living, needed to learn how to make a living, and also needed to learn how to be on the road, take care of myself on the road. So when I start getting gigs on the road, how do I sleep? How do I do
Road
this?
chops.
Okay, when do I eat? Yeah, road chops. And so the splash part never really occurred to me, because I worked with a lot of people that made that splash, and then we still all ended up in the same place because the record labels, the major labels, wanted to change them because they were black, and they said, okay, you're this type, and so everybody was like, nope, so we just all ended up, doing sessions and doing the same kind of work, and they were all very good, so I learned a lot, and it's just really, what do I need to pay my bills? And how can I be around the best musicians that I can work with so I get better?
Yep.
So that's it. I just want to get better. I just want to be the best singer that I can be in whatever field.
Yep.
Rock and roll, blues, jazz, Broadway, whatever, singing with a symphony orchestra is different. So all of those skill sets lead to work. Yeah. So if you show up and you're easy to get along with, and you do your homework, then maybe they'll call you back. So my goal is to do well enough for people to ask me back. Yeah. That's my goal. So that's how I think longevity has happened for me.
Amen.
Can I just add?
Yeah,
just,
jump in.
just quickly. I was 16 years old playing with the Thad Wilson Jazz Orchestra in Washington D.C., and we played the Anacostia Jazz Festival, and he at the time had a bass player on the gig named James King, still around, plays a lot with Gary Bartz still. And I was 16, and one of my first jazz festival experiences ever. And Mr. King said to me, he said, young man, come here. He heard me play. He said, I want you to go and practice so much that when people say, man, Jason Marshall? I hate this dude, but I'm going to call him anyway because he's strong. He said, I want you to go be that good. And over time, that ethos of personal excellence has been a sustaining force, for sure, because sometimes they're not going to like you, but they'll need you. Yeah. And at that point, they'll pay what it costs. And the personal excellence thing for me is helpful just because it allows you to know that you have always done your utmost in a given situation. So, yeah, just be great all the time.
Put that on a T-shirt, man. Be great all the time. And that's what it comes back to. I mean, there's countless times we see, man, I hate that person. but man, they sure can't swing.
You know what I'm saying?
They sure got a beat on them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hey, might need that sound, you know?
That's right.
Me and my friends, we say it is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. So it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
That leads us to our last thing.
Come on.
The final thing I'd like to close out with.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of things. There's been a lot of incredible answers and responses and thoughts and ideas about things. And this is a bit of a two-part question, I guess. So the first part of that being, how is it that we can come together and mend? I'm going to get to that later in the second part. But how is it that we can mend these relationships across generations, both here within our city of New York, but and of course the neighboring boroughs as well, Bronx, everywhere, you know, and also internationally, because everybody here does a lot of international work. The second part of that question, I know in the first part I mentioned mend, which kind of implies that something may have been broken. Which is definitely the case in a lot of situations. There is a lot of brokenness across generations. There was the infamous post on Facebook earlier this year, the Keyser post, which caused all this commotion. And, you know, and so, but I feel like what that really, aside from whatever, who's right, I really don't care.
Yeah.
It just highlighted a brokenness across generations to me, right?
Yeah.
So of course, to that, amending, but also how is it that we can create and foster these relationships with people across generations?
Sure.
So any closing comments regarding that from anybody?
I think I love Catherine's idea of just like if you have a gig, like just and you have that mindset of like, okay, I really want to learn from this person or this person. It's like, okay, like call up that person. It's like, hey, do you want to do this gig with me? Maybe it doesn't pay much, but I would love to just play with you, or if not, like, are you free to just hang out and get some coffee or something? Or when are you playing your gigs? Like, I'd love to come out and hear you. And so I think just for me, maybe just like reaching out to more of those mentors, and for people in my generation, just reaching out to more people and having those like in-person relationships, because Jason touched on this earlier, but that social media can cause sort of like a disconnect. Even though it is meant to connect people, there is sort of a disconnect with people going out and having like in-person conversations and hangouts. So that's something that I'm going to do going forward, definitely, is reaching out to more people. Especially now that I'm out of school, I have more flexibility in my schedule. So, yep.
Mending relationships takes time, and it takes honesty. And I found that it's tough to get people to be honest when they think they're also being watched. And Larry Willis told me at Roy Hargrove's memorial, he said a lot of us passed on a lot of abuse and called it culture. And so it's helpful to speak frankly about those kinds of things so that we can begin to heal and you know, as individuals, and also mend the intergenerational kind of fissures, as it were. If we all decide that we want for the same things, I find it's easier. What makes it difficult is that it feels like different generations have completely independent and often contrary objectives. I find that voicing the African American experience through music and keeping that the main thing, and as they say, keeping the main thing, is a great place. It's a kind of a great platform to meet on. But that doesn't seem to be the popular narrative right now. And for me, what prevents a lot of the healing is that there's a war on the narrative. So, in as much as so-called jazz is the sound of the African American experience of a particular time and its descendants alive now, I think if we keep that the main thing, then we're in better shape than if we don't. Right, we just have to be honest about the history. You talk about repair, like African Americans as a group are still in need of great repair, right? To to include reparations. So until there's a majority of the music community ready to have that conversation, honestly, there's always going to be stuff that needs fixing that we're not talking about. But in the meantime, I mean, I'm going to help anybody that come see me. Because like I said, I've spent too long developing the skills to not be walking around with them. But I think if time and honesty about the predicament of people will definitely be a help to that healing.
Well, I respect all eras of jazz, and I happen to like swing because that's what I do best. So just because I like that doesn't mean that that's just for old folks. That means we can all swing together. And, you know, there's a way to do that. That may not be what you choose to do yourself, but if we can respect each other's, you know, what we're into, what people are into, rather than calling it this and calling it that, and oh, that's old and that's this and that, you know. So that's what really separates. That's what I find, you know, is that oh no, you're doing that, you know, that trad thing. Well, no, it's just, you know, it feels good to me. I don't know, you know. So there's got to be a mutual respect, I think.
Agreed.
You know.
Agreed.
So we help each other understand each other.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest word for me as well, that everybody can take from this is understanding. I think that with understanding comes so much information, can come so much more empathy across generations. So anyways, I know we're over time, but I just want to take a second to thank each of you for your contribution, not only in this conversation, but also each one of you's contribution to the scene. You know, there's been so many times I've personally seen each of you all without y'all noticing. Like the first time I saw you was in St. Lucia several years ago.
Oh.
I was out with Etienne and you were performing, and I remember just seeing the first time. It's just like there's so many stories with each of you. I saw you on social media years ago before I even moved up here. I'm like, yo, who was just playing all this trumpet? You know, and then even seeing you when I got to the city, that was the first time I saw you was just in the scene. You know, I'm like, oh, this is a real street brother right here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is how they doing it up here. Okay, but anyways, I would like to thank each of you for not only your contribution to the scene, but also for making connections with people across generations, and of course for your time tonight. So everybody give it up one more time. Jason Marshall, Catherine Russell, Summer Camargo.
Thanks for having
My
us.
name's Luther Allison.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Y'all have a beautiful night. Thank you again to Ryan Maloney as well for putting this all
Appreciate
together. Y'all have a beautiful evening, beautiful night, and signing out. And big shout out to my wife. Hey, my God.
Hey.
Looking all good. My goodness. All right, anyways, we'll see y'all. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I think we might still